Hmm.
We've been
Amen.
we've been circling each other for a while, my friend. I'm so glad that this moment is here.
Ah, it hasn't been easy, but
It
hey, as
hasn't
you
been
say, we're
easy.
waiting for something good.
See, this is why.
Yeah.
This is why I knew it was right. Definitely shout out to Taz and the rest of your team who have helped us coordinate this. She's been
Yeah.
on it since October of 2021,
Yeah.
and it's been been a ball. We've been bouncing back and forth, but we are here today, my friend. So let's hop right on into it. The first thing I want to learn is I'm familiar with your material, and I know what it's like to create things that have gotten some attention in years past. And I personally, I won't speak for you, I'm kind of on to the next one, right?
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for anything that I've done in my past. But people ask me things. I'm like, oh, I haven't even thought about that for a while, right? So my first question is, I want to get caught up into speed. Like, if you're the type of person, and for those that are listening, in your last speech or one of the last popular, TED Talks that you did, TEDx Talks, was about the 110 skills of great speakers, something like that. I'm
Yes.
paraphrasing.
Mhm.
But in order to do that, you had to research apparently 5,000.
Mhm.
Yeah. So speakers or speeches. So anyone that will go through that is obsessive, is willing to do the work. And my hunch is that there's some question that you have unanswered at this moment that you are seeking to answer now. So bring me up to speed. What is the current quest that you're on? What is the current riddle you're trying to solve, my friend?
Oh my God, that is such a brilliant, brilliant question. I've never
Thanks.
been asked that before, but it's a great question.
Thanks, buddy.
Thinking about it, what is the next level? What is the next level? Well, the last 7 years, since I hacked my depression, I had a lifelong depression. I hacked that 7 years ago and came out to the bright side of life, which is the most beautiful thing I've ever done in my entire life. And nothing I will ever do will even be close to that experience of going from depressed to not depressed. So the last 7 years, I have been studying the neurochemistry of the brain, the psychology of the brain from that perspective. And that led me to my next TED Talk, which will be delivered in June this year, 2023, which will be on the topic of how to, on command, produce your own neurotransmitters and hormones so that you more or less can rule over your own emotions and by so kind of define the quality of your life. So I just published a book on that, and it's coming out all over the world end of 2023.
What's the title of that book, if you can share?
It'll probably be called 6 Substances That Will Change Your Life.
How much can we dive into that? This has created so many questions in my mind. All right, let's back up. Wait. We'll get there, but you let me know if we're getting too dense into the subject. But I'm really interested, and it's not by accident that a lot of my conversations on this show get to this space, right? Of trauma, of depression, of our own stories that we're navigating and trying to churn through to get us to this other side. Sometimes we talk about very much, and we'll get there a little bit today, like the structure of stories and what's the inciting incident and things like that. That's all valuable to people. But very often we get to this point. And buddy, I have my own, the reason that we didn't have our initial conversation was because I lost my brother that week. I have addiction.
I am
Right.
sorry, man.
It's
Sorry.
okay. I mean, dude, I'm on the surface level right now. We're not going to go there, but you can imagine, right? I haven't even touched that journey yet. And that certainly isn't the only one, right? I grew up in an abusive alcoholic home, trauma, baby. It's all about these things. And so I'm very interested in this. We could veer off and not say anything about storytelling and just talk about our own stories, because I'm really interested I empathize with that journey. And I love that. Let's talk about this. This quest that you went on was a personal, internal quest. And along the way, you've uncovered these things, you've learned these things. And so you from my perspective, from the outside perspective of watching your content, the quest is more like research based and you're learning all these things, but you're going through an internal, I mean, this is stories, right? This is the emotional journey. Do you find that most people's quest in their career is really this like emotional thing that they're navigating, this obstacle they're trying to overcome? Because in the process of you going through that, you've unlocked a lot of things. Your career has grown, your material has gotten deeper and denser and reached more people. But that wasn't necessarily, it's seemingly the journey that you felt like you were on. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair to say.
That's a big question, I understand, but let's talk about it.
No, well, I agree. You know, like the most successful people probably bring a lot from their own story, and it's usually a deep story for them, which they've somehow learned to like hack or just borrow through or something like that, and then they build their career based on that. I think what I do, and not many do, is that I'm constantly asking myself, how can I teach somebody this? So it was super weird, even from the day that I started hacking my depression, maybe not the day, but like a couple of weeks in, I was like, I need to document this. And I was deep down, like level wanting to kill myself. But I was like, I'm going to go on this journey. I'm going to hack this and I'm going to document every step of it so that I can teach others. And I think that's a little bit where I differ, because I'm obsessed by the idea of giving other people knowledge.
And why is that? What do you get out of that? Like, or why are you motivated by sharing it? It's a great thing. I share that. I feel similarly, but why do you think that is? What is that really doing for you?
I don't know where it comes from, my friend, but somewhere in my upbringing, somewhere, I don't know where it comes from, but I feel guilt. That is like one of the most driving forces in my life. I feel guilt for everyone and everything. I've learned to harness that into like pure nuclear power in order to then give to others, make others grow, so that I don't feel guilt. That was where it all began. But now it's just turned into this machine where it's been converted into just the desire and the love of seeing people grow. It's insanely addictive.
It really is. That's such a great point. That's when I had started public speaking 2018 or 19, and right when I was getting into the groove, COVID hit and kind of eliminated most in-person speaking events. And so I started doing like one-on-one coaching, and I landed on that same spot when I started helping people have their little aha moments, their light bulb moments. The feeling that I received from that, because I have been there, I've had those moments myself. I still have them because I'm still on my journey, but it's a special feeling to help someone unlock that. You said, I think I might have gotten this from were you going to say something to that point?
Now, like an example of that is, like I received an email. Here's a story for you. I received an email from a man in the Philippines who wrote that, out of nowhere, where I didn't know who he was. He just wrote that I was walking to work. I saw how kids were being kidnapped, sexually abused, sold for drugs, etc., etc. He decided there and then to start his own, what do you call those in English? You call them a, God, how can you lose a word like that? Charity. He started his own charity, right?
Yeah.
And he does that, and it doesn't work out. He helps a couple of kids, but nobody is contributing to the charity because he can't get them to do so. Running out of money. He's been doing this passion now for 12 months, trying to save these kids. Stumbles over my TED talk on storytelling, and he writes in the email that he does everything. He's watched that talk 100 times. He does everything over and over and over again, according to the recipe that I give him. He then starts to pitch in a different way. And then he writes at the end of the email, and that's almost when I start to cry, where he writes, from that day, when I started using that skill of storytelling, I have now been able to move 16 kids from the street into schooling and houses because of the money that the charity is bringing in. But that's not that's not the end. The 23rd of December that year, he sent me just a video clip, nothing else, just his name and a video clip. And I'm like, what is this? And I open it up, and there's, I think, around 35 kids from 1 year to 18 years singing my name because they're no longer living on the street. So I'm not the hero of this story. That guy is the hero of this story. But it just shows the power of storytelling, and that the content that we put out there, which we don't know who is reached by it, changes life at the very, very core. So yeah, storytelling is powerful.
Extremely powerful, and this is what I love so much about it, and this show just continues to reveal it. You know, it gets kind of, I won't say misused, but maybe overused as like a marketing term these days, right? Which of course it can be used as that because it's an extremely effective communication tool, but it's so much more than that. And that story shows it 100%. I mean, it's a connection tool. Communication and connection tool for humans, and whatever you're trying to accomplish, it can help. But that is profound. And back to your initial point that you're kind of driven by guilt. I get that. I do think there's somewhat of an obligation. I think that we have, if we have been able to navigate something successfully. I feel that a little bit too. I wouldn't have maybe labeled it guilt, but I understand what you're saying, because I do feel like we have an obligation to put that content out there, not even knowing how it might impact someone else's life. There's no way you could have predicted or even intended to do what you did, indirectly there. I want to go back a little bit and learn how we got here. And I read something in your bio. Basically, you were kind of fascinated with the brain at a young age. Is that true?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
can you point to where that originated? Because I'm fascinated with the brain as well now. I don't know that I was as a kid, but that really interested me to think about, like, where's the moment? Where did that start and why?
Well, I think it was my sadistic mother. She wasn't sadistic, obviously, but she was a teacher in philosophy. And she came in one day, I think I was 16, and she gave me a book, and she said, read this. And it's a book that you should not give to a 16-year-old. Maybe you should read that midlife, but because it's called the Existentialism by Jean-Paul Sartre. So it's like the heaviest
It's
stuff
heavy.
around. Okay. And it flipped my entire perspective of life upside down when I was 16. I'm like, wow, damn. So I'm everything. I am the universe. I am also nothing, and so on and so forth. And so that led me to explore myself more. And in my bookshelf, or in my parents' bookshelf, who loved psychology, neurobiology, and so on, there were just loads of these books. I just started reading and reading and reading and reading, and I just became obsessed with the brain, and I think psychology to start with.
Yeah.
But after a while, I figured out that there's something beneath psychology, which is neurology or neuroscience. And then I realized there's something under that as well, which is biochemistry or biology, our biology. And then there's something under that level, which is our genetics. And so all these levels, I just kept diving deeper and deeper during my life.
Yeah, and you can see, I can see it, like, starting with, the first big one, death by PowerPoint, which is in that vein, right? But like, you can see that this is that level of those tiers that you just outlined. Were you from the like corporate environment? Like, what inspired you for that angle specifically?
I started my own IT company when I was 18, and I got a big contract of delivering a big IT training for IBM. And I was to employ a bunch of other teachers, and they sucked.
Yeah.
So I had to teach them how to train people based on what I'd learned about the brain, which then worked so much better. I even got a scholarship from IBM at this point of time because my trainings were so much more efficient than others. So this just led me to building my first public speaking training when I was kind of 19. And I've just been doing that since then. And PowerPoint is just, I look at public speaking as there are kind of 7 disciplines. And one of those disciplines is visual, visuals.
Absolutely. My background is in independent documentary filmmaking, so not total opposite of the corporate world, but I am a co-founder of a new startup right now. We're very early stages, but a lot of the people involved come from that. And so I've been thinking about you lately because I've been getting various presentations, decks, PowerPoints, and you see those classic issues where it's just like, how am I supposed to make sense out of any of this? It's just a bunch of text and numbers and figures and data and like, oh my God.
That is horrid. That is
Yeah,
horrid, man.
yeah,
No.
it
God.
is.
And you know what's crazy now, where you got ChatGPT, and people are like, "Oh my God, you can use ChatGPT to generate PowerPoint slides," and I'm like, "Can it get any worse?" Literally, I went into that plugin and I
Yeah.
just shoved in the presentation, and it produced the slides, and they were absolute like that was worse than corporate slides. Oh my God, the direction of this.
Yeah, I, like many people, have been very interested in it, and I think it will definitely unlock a lot of things and help aid with a lot of tasks. But if I try to write something using it, I almost found myself having to edit so much to make it like, one, comprehensible, but two, good. Then I'm like, this doesn't really help me, because if I start from scratch, I get to the end, better and quicker. You know what I mean? It was like, so certain things I think it'll be able to do, but yeah, it's not. Some people are thinking it's like a plug and play. You just drop it in and like, oh, I got my presentation, I'm ready to go.
A lovely way we used it for storytelling was that we're trying to, everyone's always trying to figure out who's their target audience. So we just collected the data that we had from about 6,000 customers that we've had through the days, and threw it into ChatGPT and asked them, what is the overall story of these people? And it just brought out 2 stories for us that kind of summarized the profiles or the personas of these people. And that was pretty cool to see.
So after the death by PowerPoint talk, I think the next one was when you really got into some of that, like the neurochemicals and neuroscience of storytelling. Is that right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because again, I think that often the storytelling is such like a buzzword now, and one, I think people still struggle to understand what it means, like what a story actually is.
I know.
Dude,
So weird.
it's so overused. Our story. Here's our story. Here's our story. Like, hey, so and so, that's not a story.
God, I know.
But
God, I went into one of the biggest companies in the world, and they wanted me to coach their entire like division of sales people.
yeah.
And they constantly use this word story, and they just brought up a PowerPoint. It's like, what's your story? Can you show me your story? What's the story? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Is this truly the definition of what a story is for you? You have messed this up entirely. Who conned you into this? That was horrible.
Oh man, I saw a video. This was years ago, but and I think that there was a response video to it, but it was like an architect, like, who designed bridges, and he's like, "Well, I
Yeah.
consider myself a storyteller,"
Yeah.
and it's just like, you're an engineer, you build bridges. Like, come on, man. So from that psychological perspective, we've already established the power and the reach of stories, right? This guy who reached out to you from where was he from again? That had the charity for the kids?
Philippines.
The Philippines. So obviously, I mean, it's redundant and it goes without saying that they're powerful. But from a psychological perspective, what's going on? Why is this something that taps into our brains so effectively, so profoundly?
Well, there's many answers to that question, but the most simple one and conclusive one is that everything that we see, our brain translates into a narrative. Right? People are listening to this at the moment, and in their brain, if a thought pops up that they need to go to the toilet, they will simulate how they will walk to the toilet, which toilet may be occupied or not be occupied, which toilet is the best, and so on. and we're constantly simulating our future, like constantly, and that's it's kind of the problem. Well, that is what creates anxiety. Because of these simulations of the possible outcomes of our future, and if we're not simulating our future, we are replaying our past, which can cause depression, but also learn from this, of course. But the entire function of it, the human being in the prefrontal cortex, is to simulate the future, replay the past in order to understand our present. And because that is our entire perspective of life. Like we never see anything in tables, in bullet points, in paragraphs, in sentences. You don't even see it in still images. We are constantly seeing life, memory, future in narratives. So when I tell you a narrative, it just hooks straight in to the very core of how the brain functions.
Man, that unlocks a lot, thinking about the stories that we have from our past, trying to predict these stories of our future. I feel like we're kind of back where we started, which is just this story that we tell ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
How important?
That's the most important story.
Right. This is where I'm going. Like, why is it so important? And it's, I think the answer to this is yes, but I want you to expand on it. Like, is this internal story, does that have to be mastered or understood or whatever, first, before we can start using it in an outward manner? Does that make sense?
Run that one by me.
I'll do this. I'll rephrase it.
Yeah.
Why is it the most important one? What happens if we don't navigate that story? What is at stake?
Yeah. Well, what I showed you in my TED talk on the magical science of storytelling is that I, on command, could create oxytocin, endorphins, and cortisol and dopamine in my audience through stories. I told a person a story. I created oxytocin in them. Oxytocin is a healing neuropeptide, right? The thing is this: when we replay stories in our own head, they create the same substances. I.e., if you think about your kids, if you think about the loved ones, you will produce oxytocin. And therefore, a lot of our stories, a lot of people's stories are cortisol driven, stress driven. They are stories about the problems coming up in the future, about the problems that have happened in our past. So they are cortisol driven. Now, if anyone looks up the effects of chronic stress or chronic cortisol, you will see that it is the number one most poisonous thing that you can do to yourself in this life. Like smoking is better. Eating bad food is better. Chronic stress is super bad. So if you keep telling yourself what I call devil's cocktail stories, it'll put you in a bad place in life. And that's the worst. But even just playing stories of, imagine going into an interview and you are replaying stories of past failures in interviews. Damn, you've kind of already lost, because that will bring down your testosterone levels. And it has been proven that people who bring up their testosterone levels prior to an interview are more likely to get the job. So what you actually want to do before going into an interview is tell yourself the stories that actually bring up your testosterone, stories of confidence, stories of victory, stories of conquest, and obviously amplify that with music and body language to amplify the testosterone levels even more. But yeah, it impacts everything in life.
Can you elaborate on the devil's cocktail for those listening?
The devil's cocktail is, well, the opposite is the angel's cocktail. That's where you can deliver a story which creates serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, testosterone, all of these which you would benefit from in life. Like I just gave you an example of testosterone. Another example of oxytocin in the angel's cocktail could be that you want your audience to connect with you, and people connect through oxytocin. So by telling them a story, like a story of vulnerability, you will produce oxytocin in your audience, just as I did when I told you the story about the Philippine guy that produced oxytocin most likely. Now, the opposite of this is the devil's cocktail. This is where you put yourself or your audience into a mental state which is disadvantageous for you. It's usually high. Well, in my very, very simple definition, it's cortisol, it's stress, it's adrenaline. But it could also be the bad versions of serotonin and oxytocin. So that's kind of it. Like, go into your audience and ask yourself, are they high on a devil's cocktail? It doesn't matter what you pitch, they won't listen to you. You need to, as a skilled public speaker, within 5 minutes, you need to create an angel's cocktail in their brain through stories, through your words, through your appearance, how you walk, how you greet them. Because then you can pitch whatever you want to.
I talk a lot about in my storytelling content about sequencing, the order in which, a narrative is laid out, the arc, etc. And I remember, not verbatim, but I remember when you were explaining how to spike someone's dopamine in one of your talks. Do you mind revisiting that? I just thought you did a very effective job of explaining it in the talk. Just the simple difference between a loose collection, of events, the and thens, and how to kind of spike that dopamine in one's storytelling.
Sure thing. It's a quick example. I'll tell you one story. It's 25 seconds long. The first one contains no dopamine. The second one contains dopamine. It goes like this. The man woke up in the morning. He put on his slippers, looked to his right, walked to the door, saw the wet tracks coming out of the bathroom, walked down the hallway, came to the balcony, looked over the railing into the pool. The end. Now, that is by definition a story. It's a boring story, so I may have actually lost your attention of those listening.
What were you saying?
Yes, exactly, yeah. So let's add dopamine to it. The man woke up in the morning. Why was it so silent? It shouldn't be. He looked to his right. The bed was empty. His heart started beating, fast. He put on his slippers. He ran to the door. It was open. It shouldn't have been. He saw the wet tracks coming out of the bathroom. He screamed internally, started crying, ran down the hallway as fast as he could, came to the balcony. Before looking over the railing, he said to himself, no. Say it isn't so. The end. Now, it's literally the same story. The second one contains dopamine, and the first one does not. And the key to doing that is unanswered questions. When the brain does not know what's going to happen, but wants to know what's going to happen, you produce dopamine in the listener's brain. And in this case, it's the questions that are unanswered in the listeners at the moment is, why was it so quiet? Why was the bed empty? And what was the problem with that? Why did his heart start beating so fast? Why did he put us on his slippers quickly? Why did he run to the door? Why was he worried that it was open and not closed? Why did he become even more worried when he saw the wet tracks? Why did he cry? Why did he scream? Why did he run down the hallway? And why did he stop just looking over the railing? About 10 questions were placed in our brain.
And back to one of your previous responses in this conversation, we probably start answering those questions or forming a story, a potential story, right, in our heads of what happened. Yes. And then it either pays off because we were right, or something completely different, which like catches us off guard. Yeah. You know what's so funny? Like that's the story that you I think the exact one that you did in the TED Talk. So I had heard it before, but this is what's so funny about the human brain. It still worked on me. Like you were on the second line, and I'd heard this before, and it still worked. And I'm able to be conscious of that. Man, yeah, that's perfect. I think a lot of people really struggle with that kind of, the opening and closing of loops, or the askings of questions and the answering of those questions. But it's so important. It's everything to kind of that rhythm, that internal rhythm of of
It's
storytelling.
absolute key. It's like it's the foundation of every presentation, every story. And in a way, I wouldn't say it's the foundation of life, but if you point me to a relationship or a life which lacks dopamine, that is a boring relationship. That's a
Yeah,
boring life. Like
that's a good point.
we want desire. We want to, like, the pure definition of dopamine is anticipation of reward. So when we get up in the morning, the reason why we jump out of bed is because we're looking forward to something, and that is dopamine driving us to jump out of that bed. So it's an important neurochemical just throughout life.
And probably very important to try to get control of. I think it can also lead the wrong way. Right.
Ooh, it's the devil in disguise, my friend.
Oh man. One thing I think that you're doing very well now is your short form content.
Thanks,
You
man.
know, I was familiar with your work just because I'm in the storytelling space. But then, you know, I found your account on TikTok pretty early in my venture there, which I think is very successful. And you're doing a very great job of it. When you look at storytelling, communication in general, which are almost synonymous, or they should be maybe, what are the similarities and what are the differences in that kind of in communication from the presentation perspective, the speaking, orating perspective, and then in this concise short form video approach? You know, I can probably assume some of the similarities, but there's challenges, right? Because I'm doing it in a 60-second video versus a 60-second or a 20-minute speech. It's not entirely the same. So in what ways do you approach it similarly, and what are the changes in your approach that you have to make for those different you know, types of communication?
Ooh, well, that's a tricky world, you know. And the thing is if you ask me this question in a year from now, my answer will be different. If you
That's a fair
ask me
point.
the question 1 year prior to this, my answer would have been different. But it seems like one thing is true, though, currently, but there are exceptions, and that is that our attention span is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And therefore, whatever you produce needs to be more extreme. And like if you're doing a speech and you have people locked in in a cinema and there's
Right.
500 people there, you can pause and you can deliver that story with such passion. You can drag out a story for 7 minutes because they won't leave. And not just because they don't really want to, is because that the option you're giving them at the moment is the best option they have. But on TikTok, the person swiping,
Yeah.
they think that they may find a better option. So even if you are this brilliant storyteller, they're like, there's someone out there who is more extreme than you are. And therefore they go, well, this is good, but I think I can do better. Swipe. Well, this is good, but I think it can do better. Swipe. And they just keep on swiping in the hunt for something that is violently extreme, 2-second dopamine spikes, something they've never seen before, which alerts their brain in so many other different ways. So it's tough. But again, also what's interesting is that there seems to be a trend where people want more human content, like real content, but the algorithms aren't picking it up just yet. But I think the trend is currently that they want more real content.
I agree. If you listen to the conversations that are happening in the space and the culture, I think that shift is happening. I also agree that maybe the algorithm hasn't caught up with it yet, but I tend to agree with that it is shifting in that way. Even in the short format, though, do we still care about the same things as people? Like, will the same types of content grab their attention? I understand we're reducing it to, like, you got to hit them hard, hit them fast. But are our values, the things we care about, are they still the same in that format? Like, you know what you can talk about to kind of hook someone's attention on stage.
Yeah.
What you know?
Again, there, like you can't really compare telling a story, a fictitious story, or even a real story compared to seeing it. And today, people have filmed. Like I saw like the U.S. veterans coming, or soldiers coming back, and they haven't met their daughter who was born while they were gone. And they come walking in on the airport, and they see their daughter, and they start crying, and they just launch into this absolute oxytocin bomb. Now, I can't show up on TikTok and just tell that story, because it
Right.
is not as powerful as seeing it.
Not at all.
And there's billions of people filming things every day that is just, it just becomes more real and extreme. But I'll say this though, that is that the stories that I've told on my TikTok channel are actually among the most consistently popular content. And that is 60-second stories about, I'd say, wisdom stories, old stories, classical stories.
Okay.
And they're super enjoyed, like by millions and millions. So there's still an opportunity to tell stories in short form.
I want to switch gears before we go. I want to switch gears back to your personal journey through depression. I know through this conversation we've talked about basically the story you tell yourself, right? And if you're telling yourself kind of a devil's cocktail type of story, it may lead to that. So reframing your perspective and your thoughts is a big part of that. But is there if there's someone else that's that's going through that, and spoiler alert, there's a lot of us. Is there any tactical advice you have, like on that in the beginning of this, like the first steps? I'm always very interested in the, like, not the big picture theory or strategy, but like, what do I do today? At step 1 or step 2, when I'm at this low point in my life and I can't see a way to dig myself out of this pit.
The most powerful thing out there, which is something that we can all do very quickly, is meditation. So I'd say that is actually one of the 5 things that I did to hack my depression to begin with, and then I added another 10, 15 things. But one of the 5 first things was meditation. I did 20 minutes a day for 6 weeks, and then I kind of saw the light after that. And there are like scientific reasons why that is, but meditation is not just a quick fix, but it solves something at the moment, but it also trains your brain to stop and not launder your thoughts over and over and over and over and over again. It gives you the power to choose what you want to think, which is incredibly powerful, because it practically means that it gives you the power to your own play button on YouTube, but in your own brain. And if you don't have meditation, it's like your stories are just looping over and over and over again. But with meditation, you install a pause button and a play button, which you can then kind of control.
I had some I've always struggled with consistency. Lately I've been fairly consistent, so it's been helping. But recently, at one point, it was like a Monday morning. My wife was out of town for the week on a work trip, so I have 2 children, and I had both of them. Now they're in daycare typically during the day, but it's a lot, 5 or so days with the kids by yourself. And my son had an eye infection, couldn't go to school for a day or 2. And my wife, who was just about to go to the airport, was already worried about me, because, I don't do well when things like knock me off course, right? Or like this was my plan for the day, and, now that story has been changed. And so she was like worried, because also she knows what it's like to be home when you're trying to work from home already full time, and you've got a 1.5-year-old who's very needy. This one, beautiful and sweet and funny, but very needy. And I was just like, right before she left, I was like, no, I got it. It's good. It's good. And I was even asking myself, like, why am I handling this so well? And she's over there like, why is he handling this so well? And I tracked it back. The only thing I could come up with is like, oh, I've had a pretty steady streak of meditation. That's the only thing. And can I guarantee that's why it was? No, but hey, that day, I was able to navigate that. So I also agree, and that's something that I've really tried to prioritize this year is being consistent with that, and also not being hard on myself if I miss a day, just hopping right back on the horse, as they say.
Good. Yeah.
Can I ask what the other 4 things were? The 4 main things, as you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. The second one was what I call stress mapping, which means that you write down everything that is what you define as a stressor today, a negative stressor. So you write everything down on a piece of paper, and then you just get at it. You spend like 2 weeks reducing that list to 0.
That's good.
You get rid of things. You either you get rid of things or you learn how to solve them. For instance, in your case, meditation would have solved a bunch of things on your stressor list. So when I did this, I had 65 stressors, and that was obviously causing chronic cortisol and producing stories of a devil's cocktail kind. So that was the second one. The third one was focus questions, which is the questions we ask ourselves about life. Mine was so negative all the time. I had one which was going, what's wrong with that? 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 Which more or less just created an devil's cocktail every time I used it. So I rewrote my focus questions by simply persistence. I changed my what's wrong with that to what's amazing with that. And it was really hard to begin with, but give it 2 or 3 months and my brain got used to the new kind of question about life and about myself. So that was the third thing that I did. Fourth thing was exercise more regularly, which was just brilliant. And let's see, the last one would probably be, in this case, mindfulness practice, because the entire point of mindfulness is to not tell stories. It's about just enjoying the experience that you're in. It's not about replaying the past or simulating the future. It is just about smelling the flower. So it's literally the only time that you don't tell a story about yourself. And most people aren't very good at that. As soon as their mind just wanders off.
Yeah.
So I'd say those 5. Yeah,
that's important. The list, I think, is very effective, and that's total perfect answer to my tactical question, because that's something that they can do. By the way, 65 stressors sounds like a lot. Do you think that's a lot, or is that pretty normal for folks? Or can you even say? It's, to me, I might have 100. I don't know. I haven't done this exercise.
That's true. Well, I have 2 programs in my company. One is called Presenter Mastery, how to become a world-class presenter and storyteller. And then I've got another program called Life Mastery, which is how to become just absolutely brilliant at life and create the best life for yourself. And in that training, I keep asking people to do this list. And it seems like about 25% have the similar amount as I have or more. The rest usually end up with about 30, 35.
I'll report back, because I'm also going to do this.
Do it. Yes, please.
This list. Before we go, can we revisit the topic of the new book that's coming out? The new tier that you are pursuing, the new question you're trying to answer?
Yeah. Yes, I launched it on the 8th of November last year in Sweden, where I come from, or I'm British, half Swedish, and it became an absolute success. It's been the best-selling non-fiction book since then in this small country, but it still proves that it's incredibly powerful, and it's kind of the recipe to life from a neurochemical and biological perspective, from a practical point of view. So it's going to be called The 6 Substances That Will Change Your Life, and I know at least 12 countries have bought the rights to it now, and it'll be another 8, I think. So about 20 this year. And the UK one, United Kingdom, will be coming out in August, September, and anyone in the US will be able to buy that one as well. We don't have
the US hasn't bought the right yet.
We don't have the set date for the US yet.
I'll talk to him. All right.
You do that, man. You do that.
Yeah.
Yes. Send them to me.
Jesus. Can we talk? Can you tell me what those 6 substances are?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They are dopamine,
Mhm.
oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, cortisol, and testosterone. And you can actually see it like 6 kinds of happiness. People say that there's one kind of happiness, but there isn't. There's so many nuances to happiness. There's actually nothing called, there's nothing in us which is happiness. That's just something we've made up. And a lot of people look for that thing which we just made up, but it's just
and it's pretty subjective. Like,
oh yeah,
what makes you happy might not make me happy. This is a question this is a whole nother conversation, but this is a question we don't ask ourselves enough. It's funny. I just finished rereading Morgan Housel, I think is his name, The Psychology of Money. But one of the main premises were that we don't ask ourselves like what game we're playing, like what we're trying to accomplish. It might not be what the day trader is trying to accomplish. So why are we emulating his or her moves? It's the same thing with happiness. Like, that's a headache waiting to happen, just trying to decipher that. But that's really interesting. I'm interested in the role testosterone plays. I will certainly be interested in reading the book. But the other ones tell me that, and this is a good way to wrap up our conversation, that everything is storytelling, because those are the same chemicals.
I will send you a copy as soon as it's out. Yeah.
Lovely, my friend. David, I could go on forever with you. I love the way your brain works. I'm really appreciative that you shared some of your journey with us today. Again, I think it's no secret that a lot of us that are trying to answer some of life's biggest questions are really navigating something significant. So I appreciate you sharing that with me today.
Such an interesting conversation. I wish we can hang out and chat in the future when I come over to the US.
If you come this way, you let me know. I haven't been to Sweden in a while, but I do have some friends in Stockholm, so I will grant you the same courtesy.
Love it, man. Love it.
All right, brother. Have a great day.